as we even start. So we're continuing with this mimer that's in the Hosafos, in the addendums. We said it's from Tafkov Samach Gimel, 1802. And the topic is ostentiously Chassan and Kala, a groom and a bride, and what their joy is. So we saw that the groom represents Havaya, represents the light that encircles all worlds and surrounds all worlds. And the bride represents Elokim, or the name that fills all the worlds, right? The part of godliness that appears as enclosement within reality, or a malchus in another way of saying it. Okay, so now by doing mitzvos, what we left with last time was that by doing mitzvos we create the revelation of Havaya in Elokim. Right? That's the main purpose, and that's called the unification of Kudsha Brichu Shchinte, of the Holy Blessed One and the Shechina, the Divine Presence. And then he gave us, as an example of this, the pasuk in Isaiah, just as a woman approaches labor, she begins to cry out from the contractions. So are we before you, Havaya. So are we before you, Hashem.
What about the fact that the Shechina is supposed to be the Kala?
Right, that's what we just said.
Oh, you said that?
Yeah, the Shechina is the Kala. The Shechina is the Divine Presence. And again, the whole idea is, and we've seen this many times, this is not the main thing. The main thing comes out in the last few paragraphs, as always. He's giving more and more introductions. The introductions, we've seen all of them, so in a certain sense we could just skip over them. I went over it last night again, and I don't remember if I saw... The thing that struck me in the beginning was the kele, was the idea of describing the light that is imbued, that's engarbed in reality, as if it's in a prison. So, in a sense, that's the ikar of this mimer, that chiddush. And what does it mean? In a certain sense, I would say, like, what did he build it around? He built it around this new definition of the light that fills reality as being imprisoned. But when you hear prison, what you hear is, we hear something negative. He didn't hear something negative. He heard that there's something keeping you there so that you don't run away. And that's what he's going to develop. Meaning that there's this light has a tendency, it would have a tendency to escape. In other words, reality has a propensity to be redeemed much more quickly than you expect.
The light returns to its source.
Right. It has this very strong inclination to leave this prison that it's in. It doesn't want to be limited in this way. So there's almost like there's an idea here that's being developed, that as we go forward, as we come closer and closer to the birth or to the redemption, the prison aspect becomes worse and worse. Meaning you feel that something's forcing you to stay where you are. And that's sort of how he describes the birth pangs. That the births should have happened just immediately. But something's keeping it inside so that it doesn't leave. In that sense, that's the description of the Jewish people in the last 86 years of their exile in Egypt. That the first 150 years or so weren't so bad. But as they came closer to the redemption itself, to being taken out of Egypt, it became worse and worse.
Because the duck is worse than just before.
So why? So here the idea is, I'm saying the end already, because I don't want to miss out on the end. But the end is that if there wasn't something keeping you in there, then you would have run away just before most benefit that you could have received from the exile. Meaning you have a tendency to run out, to escape. And so
it shows you that the Haskalah and all these other things is Dafka proof that Mashiach is coming because of all these people who are running away from Yiddishkeit just when Mashiach is about to come.
So I was thinking that this was more like the Holocaust. That
the Holocaust was a different force. That was a force that...
Good. It's a force that keeps you inside.
Well, this was not people running away.
There were a lot of people that were running away before. There's a famous thing that in Warsaw, today in Eretz Yisrael, I don't know of a single newspaper that comes out on Shabbos. There used to be one, Davao. You probably remember it still. Hardly. It was around till the mid-70s for sure. I saw it. I used to see it. I think that was the only newspaper that ever came out in Eretz Yisrael for all its non-religiosity and so on. It was the only newspaper I think that ever came out on Shabbos. And since it's gone, there's nothing like that. I mean, you could argue today everything on the internet is the stuff comes out on Shabbos, but they never ran a printing press on Shabbos. In Warsaw, before, meaning in 1935, 6, 7, 8, there were 3 daily newspapers, Yiddish newspapers, that came out on Shabbos. This is stuff that people don't know. I mean, there was such a... I mean, remember when were you there in the Beit Chabad when the shaliach in what's this? The big place in Ukraine, the guy who has from birth to grave, and who has most of us all the way through. In Chernigov, no, where is he? In Kamenets? No, can't be. Well, the big. No, not in Dnieper. It's near. It's more in the western part of Ukraine. He's famous.
So famous, I've never heard of him.
Yeah. He was the first one to build. That he has his own place for women after birth. Hospice, and then he has. Kindergarten, and he has a daycare, kindergarten, school, high school, some occupational. What's his name? I can't remember the name. Anyway, it's not far from Mezhibush. I don't remember where. Mezhibush is in the same Oblosk, or whatever they call it. Anyway, he was in our Beit Chabad like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He came for a Shabbos, and I don't remember why. And he told us, for Brang, that was really great. He had a lot of stories. And one of the things that he told us was his hobby. When he goes around Ukraine, he looks for old records of Yidden. And he says that a few years ago he came to the conclusion that the communists, everybody has in their head that the communism was what secularized the Jews. He says by the time communism came along, there was nobody left to secularize. He says he has records of it. He says you see that there are no weddings after 10. There's nothing left. There's a few old people that were. It says it's not the communists.
Where was everybody?
They had been, because of the Bundsmen or whatever, everybody had secularized already. It wasn't because the Holocaust was mamish to a destruction of a destroyed reality already. People were Jewish, but they weren't from.
So Eretz Yisrael basically was built in Odessa.
By non-from people.
Right.
We're talking 1880s, 1890s.
Chada'am and all this group.
Ben Gurion also from Odessa.
But there were places you were very from.
There
Odessa
were.
wasn't from, but Krakow was very from.
Some of the places were, like Krakow. Krakow was a Yotzei Dafin. But Warsaw, where all the big rebbes were before World War II, 3 newspapers that came out on Shabbos. It's almost, you can't understand. Yeah. Anyway, the point is that the contractions are there to keep the baby in, not to let him out, not to force him out. That's not the way that we understand contractions. I think we understand contractions as what pushes, But it's kind of weird that it's called chavalim. Chavalim is like to connect something, like a chevel eretz is like a parcel of land that you're connected to.
Mm-hmm.
So to call the, and in English it's called contractions. So maybe you think about it as contractions as trying to push it out, but contractions are muscles contracting. How do you get something out of a muscle that's contracting? I don't understand that. If it's a circular muscle, shirim tabatim, I don't know how you say them in English, like that you have in your in your intestines and it pushes the food along. I understand. So maybe that's what it is, but the whole idea of that it's called chavalim in Hebrew, chavlei leida, is like that it's keeping it in. Okay, so what I propose we do is we skip a little. And we skip. Yeah, Olam Dilug here. And the whole time, the greatness. He says, what is the purpose of being pregnant? What is the purpose of exile? Exile is being pregnant. That's the big chap here. We know that. I mean, the Arizal says that 200 years before. So, but the chap here is, but the point that he makes here is that during the exile is the only time that you can take the name Havaya and bring it into Elokim. Because once you're done with the exile, there will be no Elokim. And so he says it here. I'll find it for you.
Which page?
I don't know, because I'm looking at the one that has
no pages.
I'm good, but not that good.
What have you got up there?
וזהו ודע בכל זה משך זמן הניבור. נו. הנה, וזהו העבודה.
Okay.
וזהו העבודה בכל משך זמן העיבור. This is our task during the time that we're pregnant, meaning that we're in exile. שיתגלה שם הוויה, it's to reveal the name Havaya. To reveal, what do you mean? Because Havaya is not revealed. Because the surrounding light is not revealed in the present constellation in the world. You can't see the infinite nature of God. And that's what we do during the exile. As it says, that in the future, in the future, Havaya and his name will be one. Meaning, the sages ask, today he's not one? What are you telling us? That God isn't one today? No. What I mean is, the way I'm expressed, the way I'm pronounced is not the way that I'm written. Meaning the essence is not the same as the revelation. So the essence of God is Havaya. But he's not revealed as Havaya, he's revealed as Elokim, or Adni. And in the future he'll be pronounced, his name will be pronounced the way that it's written. Havaya. In the future, the name will be pronounced the way that it's written. What does that mean? That he'll be revealed the way that he really is. So what is the benefit of the galus? What is the benefit of being in exile? That you can reveal him in a place that he's concealed. So that I won't be able to do.
His name is like a familiarity with the Shem that there wasn't before.
Not familiarity in the sense of vulgar, being vulgar, but in the sense of there not being a sheath anymore. There not being some kind of limitation on coming to know God. What does it mean? The curtain will be removed.
Mm-hmm.
The curtain will be drawn, opened, and you'll see what was behind everything. So now, once that's done, there's no more toil, or at least this type of toil is finished. Okay? This is a famous idea. So the whole purpose of the exile is to have a limitation on God's revelation. That's the womb that keeps the fetus in, so that it doesn't fall out. Until we come to see God's face, as it were. And then when you come to see God's face, then the birth happens. So all this is wonderful. Okay? And there's a lot to say about this, and he continues on, and he has a lot to say. But it doesn't end with that. Because we started, I don't remember if you remember, but yesterday we started about the whole topic of La'aloto el eretz zavat chalav udvash. That after you leave Egypt, meaning the exile is over, then you come to a land of milk and honey.
Mm-hmm.
He says, why? Why do you need that? Isn't the main thing to come out of exile? If you've come out of exile, you've done everything. The same thing we would ask about our exile.
It's the same question you ask about why did that come out with Chush Godel? Why did that come with Chush Godel? Because Baruch Hu let them free. What do you...
There's a lot of questions. But here he's focusing on what God says now, that I'm taking them out of Egypt to bring them to a land that's flowing with milk and honey. So what do I need the milk and honey for?
It's an incentive for them to...
So it's an incentive, it's this, it's that. Those are material answers. What do the milk and honey represent in the process? I mean, if you've already revealed godliness and everything, so what does milk and honey have to do with it? What can you do more? He says, no, hold on. There are further stages of development. Coming out of exile is not the end-all and be-all of life. Because once you're out of exile, there's something to do. There's a lot of things to do, in fact. So now he's going to trace what happens after they come out of exile, as going to a land flowing with milk and honey, what that means in us. Meaning, in other words, if a person has already revealed their divine soul, so now what? What does he need to do now? Okay. So I'm going to read it now quickly, and not really translated, but try to get to the main point. There's no contractions of the womb in the middle of the pregnancy. There's only the difficulty of the pregnancy itself. But the main purpose of these contractions at the end of the birth is to keep the baby in for a little bit longer. In the same way, we understand that people cry out in the exile when there's a lot of opposition, meaning at the end. And that, those are what we call the contractions of Mashiach, the birth pains of Mashiach, that people will cry out. And he says the main thing that people will cry about won't be the physical conditions, but the fact that they can't reveal God's name. They've been trying to reveal God's name in the world. They're trying to see godliness in the world, but they can't see it. And that's what they're going to cry out about. But until the time comes for the birth to happen, meaning for the exile to end and the redemption to come, there is not yet crying out because of the birth pains, meaning because the baby can't come out, it can't be revealed. In the metaphor, it means that God's name can't be revealed yet. In the same way, everything that we are giving birth to is what God put into us. Okay? In the same way that the woman gives birth to what the male put into her, the seed in the beginning. What does this mean in not physically? It means that whenever a person is faced with difficulties, he calls out to God during the time that he's pregnant, meaning during the time of exile. What does it mean he calls out to God? He says, I don't understand how this aspect of my life is godliness. I don't see any good here. I don't see anything, and so it can come as a feeling of it's so difficult, and also be a feeling of it's not that it's difficult. I can suffer the difficulty. What I really have trouble with is my inability to recognize intellectually, spiritually. I can't recognize godliness in what I'm experiencing. And that gives birth then to Havaya in the world. That gives birth to godliness in the world. Each person has the ability to grasp this as much as he can. There are differences between people, and that's called the odim. The amount that you spend. The redness comes from the mother, and so the mother here is like the mother principle, like Ima. And what she does is she meditates. She's the power of meditation. Okay? Since we already said this word meditation so many times, we may as well say one more point. This is the big difference between meditation, Jewish meditation, and Goyish meditation, which is unfortunately a very big problem, because there's a lot of Jews that not only bought into Eastern meditation, but they were led astray by some well-meaning rabbis who wrote books trying to show that Jewish meditation is like Eastern meditation. The difference between Jewish meditation and Eastern meditation is that Eastern meditation is all about emptying the mind. And Jewish meditation is all about contemplating the Torah. And when you contemplate the Torah, you're contemplating something in the mind. You're not emptying the mind at all. In fact, it's the other way around. You're coming with a structure, and it fills out. The structure fills. The structure is what you've learned in the Torah. That's the mother principle. That's the ima in this whole thing. That when you learn Torah, you're learning a structure. It's very important to have a structure in your mind. If a person's learning Talmud, so they should have a picture of the sugya. They should have a picture of the Shakla V'Tarya. They're learning halacha. They need to know how the different rulings progress through the generations. Whatever you learn, there should be a structure. If you're learning a pasuk, so learn all the pirushim on the pasuk, and each one of the commentaries on the pasuk, since it was written by a holy scholar. So it's another part of the structure. And then you close your eyes if you want to, and when you're holding this whole structure in your head, the one thing that's missing from it still is the divine light. The divine light that comes into it is like a seed that enters into the womb, meaning that what you've created, the structure that you've created, that's the womb. And it needs to be inseminated by Havaya, by godliness, to come alive in you. Because otherwise it's just knowledge. Otherwise it's just, the structure is just intellectual, it's just knowledge.
Don't you need emunah for that?
Why? I mean, you need emunah for everything, but...
If you don't believe in Hashem, then how can it...
No, obviously. Okay. No question. If you don't believe in the whole thing, well, what are you doing? Like, why would you even believe that the structure has any meaning? Maybe it's just a bunch of gibberish. No, obviously you understand that Torah is Torah Hashem and so on, and everybody who's advanced
You're
it.
talking about it like it's a
Technoprose.
process which takes place, whether you're involved or you're not involved.
No, what do you mean? You have to hold the structure in your head. You have to learn. It takes a lot of effort. And then to even hold it in your head, even for a minute, just to contemplate it, even for a minute, is difficult. It's hard work. It's sort of like the closest thing that I can... you get a freebie when you take a shower. Everybody knows that when you have the best ideas when you take a shower. Why? So
I have 3 times a day when I can sit and concentrate all about my bitcoins and the stock exchange and everything. One in the morning for about 10 minutes, one in the afternoon.
That's when you have your best idea?
What?
That's when you have your best ideas.
No, that's a joke. It's a joke.
Can't understand, but that's when you...
That uses it 3 times a day when they can concentrate on their business. So,
Yeah.
that's
So the best ideas come when a person's in the shower. Why? What's so special about the shower? Because it's the shower, they're getting a small inkling of what you can get through Jewish meditation. Because in the shower, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're thinking. But you're thinking freely. You're not constrained by the usual thought patterns. But you're thinking. And you notice your thoughts. And they're interesting and they're important. Now imagine that you could do this every time you finish learning something. You have it in your head. You have it ordered. It's all orderly. It's in here. Now sit with it for just a minute. Let it work.
That's the way you're supposed to learn.
Okay. And then when you do that, that's called the aliba de date. That's called inserting your 2 cents into it. Call it. That process is like being in the shower and all these great ideas coming because it begins to connect to all kinds of things. But that's called the insemination. And if you do that properly, everything that you learn, you have chidushim from here to the end of the world. Because that's what Havaya is. Havaya is the part of God that's infinite. So suddenly the infinite aspect of everything that you've learned is uncovered.
You know Yecheskel Gold? Rabbi Yecheskel Gold?
Oh.
He's a very firm Jew who lives in learned in the Mir for a long time, but became a Chabadnik. So he learned Ayin Base
Mm-hmm.
from beginning to end, the whole thing. He had terrible problems. He couldn't put it together. He couldn't put it in order. He couldn't make sense of the whole setup. And he went to New York for Farbrengen. He's sitting there for Farbrengen with the Rebbe. And he sort of like listening and half closed his eyes. And then the whole of Ayin Base appeared for him in front of his eyes. And then all the pages and all the started to move in front of his eyes until he saw the whole Seder, which way it was supposed to be and how it was put together. And
So that's how it's supposed to work.
Present from Rebbe.
But the chidushim are more than that. It's not just that it comes together. It's that suddenly you understand what follows. So what does this all mean? Where does this all go? That's the end of the exile. You said that the exile is the part where you have to learn. To actually open up a sefer, you have to open up the book and you have to actually learn it. And there's a tendency to want to stop. The contractions would be to hold you there to learn it once more, even though you're finished. That's the feeling of the difficulty before the birth.
What's that man?
It's over now. I don't want to continue another day. I want the baby out of me already. But no, one more day. That one more day is more useful than everything that will happen afterwards with the child. For you. That one more day does things for the child much more than anything else. And that's why, by the way, there's always a tug of war between the doctors and the rabbis. The doctors want to do a ziluz all the time. It's been months. You know what? They once even, I heard it from one of my friends, they spilled the beans. They said, why? We'll take better care of him than the womb. They think that they can take better care of the baby than the womb.
They don't know about learning Torah in the womb.
They don't know anything about what's going on in the womb. For them, the womb, after the 30th week, is just hindering. It's just, it's not doing anything anymore. Whatever the womb can do, we can do better. Our incubator is much better than the womb. We can take care of it, and we're this, we're that. They're very certain of themselves that that's what they do. But the whole picture here is very different, that if you can continue it one more day, continue it. And, there's not very many women today. If you would tell somebody that there's pregnancy for 12 months, they'd look at you and say, you're nuts. No such thing. But I know a woman who was pregnant for 11 and a half months. Why? Because she was adamant not to have a ziluz, not to have I don't know what they call it in English. What do they call it?
Ziruz.
Ziluz. Not to have the
Induction.
of labor. She didn't want to. So there is such a thing as a 12-month pregnancy. There is such a thing. But doctors don't let it happen anymore today. Why? Because maybe they're right. Maybe there are problems that happen after the 10th month. Once the 10th month starts. Maybe there are problems. I don't know. I don't know enough of their statistics. But I know that the common sense or the common common knowledge today in medicine is you don't let the woman proceed after 9 months, maybe another week. You don't let them anymore, and you induce the labor. So here the idea is, at least spiritually, that when you're learning, you have this tendency to finish, get it over with, and there's something from the structure that's not fully built. Even though you may think you have the entire structures, especially when you're smart.
It's like learning Me'er V'Achad.
Learning
just from Me'er.
And that 101st time, here we would say it's much more than that. That the 101st time is when you're reviewing it, not with the books, but without anything. And in that sense, the 101st time brings in the insemination. That brings in what it was waiting for the whole time. The insemination in this case happens at the end, not at the beginning. It's very interesting. There's an insemination obviously at the beginning that you have to start working with. I mean, if you open a book and the first sentence doesn't get you, you may not continue. That's what you called before the faith that I have. I have a faith that anything that I learn in Torah, it's going to be useful. It's worthwhile. It's a mitzvah. There's something to it. So I have a reason for continuing. And then you continue through the whole exile, which is learning the whole text and trying to figure it out and so on. But then eventually there's a moment when you have to give birth. And the birth would be, in this case, when something new is produced. When something new actually comes out. That's the insemination of Havaya into Elokim. And it's actually happening the whole time that you're learning. But the moment that it's revealed, that the whole time you were adding these innovations into the structure of what you were learning, that happens at the moment of birth, at the moment when you finish and you do the last 101st repetition, call it. So that's another way that this is explained in Chassidus. והנמשל מכל זה, sorry, we're not going to finish this. I don't know how to do it quickly, because we're not going to get to the main thing.
We have tomorrow.
Kevin, I wanted to learn Levi Yitzchak at least 2 days. You said 2 days, so we only have tomorrow. So anyway, ודוגמת זה, are we in the same place?
Basically, yeah.
No, we're not in the same place.
You skipped a little bit.
No, we skipped a lot. Sorry, we skipped a lot.
I was with you till you stopped just now.
והעלאת מן זה מן האודם ולהישך תשוקתך. כן? That you saw?
No.
Sorry. דהיינו אישה כי תזריע וילדה זכר והאישה מזרה תחילה מן האודם שבה. So we explained what the redness is.
Okay.
Those are the repetitions. שממנו אור ובשר של ולד ושחור שבעין מהאבא. And the black of the eye that's also from the mother. כמו כן על דרך משל כל ימי העולם הזה שהוא בחינת דיבור. In the same way, all of history is this way also. דהיינו על ידי בחינת העלאת מן דכנסת ישראל מיושבי אש התשוקה והתלהבות בהתבוננות הוויה. That we are constantly making the womb through our excitement about meditating on God. בכל אחד משאר בליבה. And each person has their own abilities of what they can grasp in their heart, and that's called the redness. That's called what the feminine part of reality brings to the table. We're bringing our enthusiasm about meditating on God. That's called creating the womb. That's called creating the structure from which this baby is going to be born. מזה נעשה בחינת דיבור. That's what the pregnancy is made out of. מה שנמשך שם הוואי להיות מלובש בתוך שם אלוקים ועדני. You made a mistake here. So that's what we do in the exile. We're constantly seeking to find godliness. And that seeking to find godliness, whether it's in learning or in or other experiences, whatever, that's the pregnancy. That's what it's made out of. And that's building the redness, the red part of what's going to be born, the redemption that's going to be born. כמו כן, על דרך משל, we said, דהיינו על ידי בחינת העלאת מן, we said this, והעלאת מן זה מן האודם, ואלישך תשוקתך נקראת קלה, קול השם, or קל השם, קל ה'. The hay, the final hay of Havaya, the malchus, the kingdom, the feminine aspect, is constantly yearning. שמקבלת מבחינת כי כל בשמים וארץ, it's receiving from the foundation, ומזה נמשך שתהיה קלטה נפשי, and from what it receives from the foundation, it constantly feels that there is interest in her. That's why that's why we also say that in the last 3 months, the last trimester, the relationship between the husband and wife is critical for the baby. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We said that the first 3 months, it's not good for the baby. The second 3 months, it's not good. How does it work? The first 3 months, it's good for the woman, not good for the baby. Good for the woman, not good for the baby. Second trimester, it's good for the baby, not good for the woman. And the last trimester is good for both of them. Why is it good? Because it keeps everything excited. It keeps everything together. It allows the baby to finish forming. That's what he's saying. But the fact that this is not being revealed, that's the prison aspect of the feminine. That's the prison aspect of the bride. So now he's finally getting to the chalav udvash. But before he gets to the chalav udvash, he's going to make another backtrack. So he says, it's not that the process is over once the baby is born, because that's not the end of the process. Rather, it grows for 2 years from the mother still. It's still dependent on the mother for the next 2 years, out through suckling. And that's what's called Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. And that's what's meant by a land flowing with milk and honey. Perush Zavat Chalav, flowing with milk. Lanik hanolad bechalav de'ima. It continues to feed what was born from the mother from the milk from the mother. Midadim shebimkom bina dafka kedei lagdil havalad. And the milk comes out of the breasts, and the breasts, which are like an extension of the heart. And the heart is a place of contemplation. It's a place of understanding. It's the place of the mother principle. So that's where the milk is coming from. So the milk represents more understanding, more bina, more meditation, as it were, that comes out, that happens after you already give birth. What would that be like? After you've finished learning. And now you've done these 5 minutes that you've just contemplated and you have all your chidushim. So what would be to continue to grow this without the womb? What would be like suckling? What?
Go on to the next moment.
No, it's the same one. You still want the same one. So it would be like teaching it.
Yeah.
Suckling, like
You
breastfeeding.
can't teach it, you haven't learned it.
Right. And it grows as you continue to feed others with it. So you're feeding it. You're making it grow by giving to others, by giving the shepherd. That's the zavat chalav. Okay, that's in this mashal. In the redemption, it means that even after the redemption, and something is born, some revelation of godliness is born, it needs to be breastfed. So there's another process that needs to happen. That's what the zavat chalav udvash means. That I'm not just going to take you out of exile, out of Egypt, but even once you're out, there are processes that continue.
Chalav, but where's the devash?
Hold on. The dvash is even... So the chalav will be the chesed, we'll see. The dvash is going to be the gvura that comes to it. That he's going to explain. וביאור דבר זה, כן. הנה אנו רואים שהוולד נולד בקטנות מאוד. We see that when the baby is born, it's tiny. ועל ידי החלב שיונק הוא גדל בכל איברים שלו לפי ערך גידולו לאחר הניקה. And then the milk, the mother's milk, is what makes it grow tremendously. I think it doubles itself or triples itself in the first 2 years. It's probably even more than triples itself. At the end of 2 years, I think you're certainly at 10 kilograms. So it's about triple. שהרי לאחר 2 שנים דינקה הוא גדל מעט בכל שנה, because the big growth spurt is in the first 2 years. And afterwards it's much slower. I mean, you don't come to 20 kilograms until you're about 10 or 11. And then hopefully you don't, then it takes another 10 years until you get to 60. So it takes another 10 years to triple that at best. And then it depends on the people. There are people who by age 40, another 20 years, they double themselves again, become to 120 kilograms. And that's already too much. because agam sheyochal, because after the suckling, after you finish breastfeeding, agam sheyochal הרבה אין המזון מגדילו כל כך כמו שהחלב הוא מגדילו בשתי שנים דיניקה. Because the milk that you feed from your mother, it makes you grow much more quickly than any other amount of food that you'll eat later on. שנגדל הרבה מאוד בחצי שנה, here he says in 6 months. יותר שמיגדל לאחר יניקה בשתי שנים וכדומה. Okay, in any case he's comparing the growth rates. אין זה אלא מסיבת החלב שטבעו להגדיל הגוף יותר מהמזון. So גדולה, any type of growth is always related to chesed. So from here we learn that the milk that's coming out of the breasts, it represents some loving kindness that has to occur even after the redemption, even after the birth. והתועלת העיקרית ביניקה הוא ההגדלה, מלבד משהו לא גם כן למזון וחיות כלחם. The main thing is that even though it provides you energy to live, its main property is to make you grow. That's the main thing about milk. וטעם הדבר, למה החלב מגדיל? Why does milk cause you to grow? ולפי שהחלב שבדדים במקום בינה שבלב, כי דם הלידה נעקר ונעשה חלב מצדק במוחין שלה, ומשם נשפע ויורד למקום בינה שבלב ונעשה חלב בדדים. וחלב זה הוא בחינת מוחין, שנתגשם וירד, על כן בכוחו להגדיל איברי הוולד, שראי כל עיקר הוולד ממוחין דאימו נלקח, ודי למבין. So he said the milk represents the mother's mindfulness. It represents her intellectual abilities. In other words, that after the redemption comes, there's a great period, as the Rambam calls it, of contemplating the Torah. And when you contemplate the Torah, that's when you really grow. Because you couldn't grow that much in the exile. But the moment that you come out, suddenly there's a burst of growth. Tremendous burst of growth. And okay, because it comes from the moichin, it comes from the seichel. It comes from the mind. That's the way it's understood. So somebody will say, what are you talking about? They don't come from the mind. There's no connection. The sages are talking spiritually. That there's some effect. There's some kind of influence that the mind has on the milk that you that the cow gives or the whatever. ודוגמה זה אנו מוצאים בעבודת השם. We see the same thing in serving God. במידות האהבה ויראה והרחמנות שנולדו כבר מן השכל. This is what we call that after the divine soul is revealed, it's not enough to have it revealed. It has to change your chesed and gvura. It has to change your midos. It has to change your emotions. And that's what this does. Meaning, there's a certain understanding here that when the redemption comes, it's like the revelation of Havai, it's the revelation of the divine soul. That suddenly you understand the divine soul. But the main thing about the divine soul is that it's not there just to contemplate God. It's here to change your emotions. It's here to change how your character. And the character is changed after the redemption, not before. It's sort of like an answer to a lot of people who say, why are my character traits not rectified? So before the redemption, nobody can really rectify their character traits.
It takes a lot of work.
No, you can't at all. Why?
You can work a lifetime to change one.
Because you can't really rectify the animal soul's character traits. Those you can't rectify. You can only do so much with them. The new you, the one that's going to be completely free of all the problems that you have, that's the new you that's going to come out after the redemption. And when you're born, then you will begin to reveal emotions and character traits that come from the divine soul, not from the animal soul. And that will change you in a way that you wanted all along.
Quantitative. Qualitative.
Categorically. It'll change you categorically. Instead of dealing with the psychology of a person who has an animal soul alone, you'll now have a reality in which you have a divine soul. And the divine soul is giving birth to your character. And not just giving birth to it, but increasing it, making it grow. That's what he means here, that the land flowing with milk and honey is a symbol for what happens after the redemption is finished. Now you've been born, you've come out as a people. I'm taking you to a land full of milk and honey to give you new character traits that you didn't have until now.
Shemot.
Okay.
Take out the Kfar You come with?
Who, me?
Yeah,
I don't even know where it is.
it's okay. You just